Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio. Today I'm sharing with you my first in the year of the series once a month doing a animal portrait. And throughout the year I'll do one each month, almost the end of January, so it's time to get this one in gear. I saw a magazine front of the Birds in Bloom magazine that had a northern cardinal on it that's sitting in some berries on some snowy branches. It seemed very January to me. I will never probably see a northern cardinal here in Arizona. They don't come here, but they sure are awesome. Super bright red, uh, fluffy looking little birds. And I would like to see one. Maybe someday when I travel, I will. So I decided to do that for my animal portrait this month. I will be doing all different techniques. This is kind of inspired by that ram that I did with the soft pastels last year, and I really enjoyed it and thought it was so much fun. It was during November when we were doing art journaling every day, and I thought this year for 2019 I would do an animal portrait each month. So I decided to do paper painting. This is a 9 by 12 canvas covered board. I think they just call it canvas board, and it's got a texture on the one side, and then on the other side is just kind of a thick paper product. It's a little bit warped, but if you put it in a frame, it would flatten out, no problem. I kind of wished that it had been smaller at the end. I was like, oh, I wished it would be 8 by 10 instead of 9 by 12. I probably could cut it actually, but um, it just seemed too big for my composition. So I decided to start out with a collage background covering the entire board and around the edges with some insides of envelopes. Just the blue ones. I have blue ones and black ones and a couple red ones. My mom likes to save them for me when she sees an interesting pattern paper on the inside of the security envelope. She saves it. So I have a lot of them. And I used 4 different patterns on this. Tore up the paper, collaged it down using Liquitex matte gel medium and that big collage brush. Really enjoy that. I'm glad I found that in South Carolina. It's from Distress Line from Tim Holtz. That's just really a good brush for collaging. So then after I had glued all that down, I calmed it down a little bit with some watered down white gesso to kind of make it all one tone sort of. There's still some darker and lighter in there. And then I decided to glaze it, and I got out 2 different colors, some darker blue and some more of a medium purple blue, and did some glazing, and then I ended up actually adding some titanium white as well. And I used glazing medium. Why would you do that? Why would you not just water it down? Well, if you put too much water in acrylic paint, it loses its polymers. They start to break down and it won't stick when it's dry. So it's a better idea to use glazing medium, which is just basically acrylic paint without any pigment in it. And then you can make your paint more translucent and still have it stick to your canvas board. So that's what I was doing. Then I decided to make some tonal variations on the background using some dripping to start with. This is the same titanium white paint that I'm dripping, and then using a spray bottle to make it run down the board. I don't like how it's clumping up at the top, and I keep getting frustrated with that. But then I decide, after looking at the picture, that there are some very fuzzy, very faded looking patterns in the background of the picture, which are when the photographer took the picture of the cardinal, they used some sort of a focusing that made the bird and the branches it was sitting on very clear. But then there's some berries and stuff in the background, like behind the bird, that are very fuzzy. So I was trying to do that by using a couple different colors of red and some white, and then like a sponge pouncer type of a brush thing that you would use for stenciling. It's like a round sponge on the end of a stick. And I bought these for stenciling, bought a whole bunch of them. trying to think of different ways to stencil better, and this was just one of the options that I found. Haven't really used them that much yet, but I pounced some of that red and orange colors on with that. Then I went in with my finger and the white and kind of toned it down, trying to just make it fuzzy, like the um, the berries are in the background. And then I decided I would drip some of that titanium white going the other direction as well, because I know that there's going to be a branch coming from that side, just to make the background more interesting. It has pattern from the envelope paper, but then it just needed something. So then I start doing my paper painting after this is dried up, and I'm using papers from my stash, painty papers that are gel printed. And I did actually gel print with the rest of the paint that was on my palette, the rest of the red and orange colored paints that were on my palette and the blue. With my 6x6, I just pulled a few prints in case I needed some extra of those red and orange type colors, also just to use up the paint, but I didn't show that in the video. This thing is way too long as it is. I tried to limit myself to 20 minutes on a video, and this one's 25 because the whole process took over 3 hours. So it's hard to condense everything down into a shorter time frame that I think someone might actually watch. So I'm just using these different papers. The big one is actually when you gel print, especially if I use my 12 by 12, I end up with like these edges of just glumped up paint because I'm printing an 8.5 by 11 sheet on a 12 by 12, so there's always extra. So I end up making these kind of striped lift papers, and that one that's in the middle there, I just kind of covered some of it up. But that's what it was. It's just the edge of some printing. They actually turn out really cool. I sometimes use them as backgrounds, just lining them up. In fact, I think I have a video where I did a paper painting of a dog that I could link at the end of the video that you can go watch if you want to, where I just used some of those edge pieces as a background, as well as some tape, cleaning the gel print with tape. So then I thought to myself, why do I need to bother drawing the cardinal if I can just trace it right off the front of the magazine? So I used a pencil and some deli paper and traced the bird, and then also traced the mask, like the black area, and then the beak separately. And then I ended up tracing a piece of the wing separately as well onto this deli paper, and I'm going to do my paper painting onto that and then trim it out and glue it onto the canvas board. So here's where I should have just went ahead and drawn the cardinal and made it larger, because the magazine, the bird looks really large on the front of the magazine, but the magazine's smaller than my 9 by 12 piece of canvas board, and that's where I went wrong. Because then when I put the bird on, it looked a lot smaller in comparison to the big blue background, and then the composition was off. So now I'm just getting out some different colors of reds, pinks, oranges, different paper scraps. These are some of the prints I did with that leftover paint, and then also just other pieces of paper that are in these boxes of scraps. Sorry, didn't mean to make everyone yawn. I know you all just yawned right now. And I'm looking at the picture and trying to get the colors and shades in the right places. Of course, a cardinal's red, so it's going to be red. That's all there is to it. But that doesn't mean that there's not some different shades of red. In this particular picture, it was all there was not a lot of color variation between the darker and lighter feathers. It really was pretty one tone, but I did find a few variations, and I'm of course using different little scraps of paper which have pattern and color on them. Some of them aren't, they're definitely not solid papers. And so that gives the texture of the bird more interest by not using like, you know, a solid printed piece of paper or a piece of cardstock or something and cutting it out and saying, okay, here's my red bird. Well, that would be flat. So by using different little pieces of paper and scraps and gluing those on, it makes the texture, even though it's something that's very solid in one color, be more interesting. And that's what I like about paper painting collage. I think it brings a lot of interest to the image. It just I think I just like it. These this piece of kind of maroonish paper is mulberry paper, and there's areas on the bird where there's like these little fluff, tufty feathers, and I was trying to see if because the mulberry paper when you tear it, it has a furry, fluffy edge. I was gluing that in some places to try to get that same effect using the paper because there's no way I was going to cut little teeny, 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 tiny strips to try to do that. I just was not in the mood for that. Not to say I've never done that, but I did not want to do that today. So it was more of a idea of texture instead of actually cutting a lot of different pieces of paper into strips and feather shapes and whatever, if you know what I mean. So then I wanted the wing to be darker so that it would at least stand out from the body. So I'm using a separate wing and collaging some different stuff onto that, starting with kind of a rusty brown and then adding some more darker and lighter striations in it with different pieces of paper so that everything wasn't all solid. That's the reason I was doing that. I thought it would look better if I did it separately. So then I cut out that wing and I collaged it back over the bird and then filled it back in with some patch pieces so that just looks, it looks like there's a shadow up by its shoulder kind of that is giving the wing definition from the bird body. So then I did the beak and the mask. That just looks like a mask to me. I don't know what you'd really call that, but the dark area around the bird's face. I did them separately and then stuck them all together and cut everything out. And then I'm collaging that onto the canvas and making him sit on the little branches that I've already collaged onto the canvas board. So if you guys are seeing these fun cardinal birds, let me know in the comments. I know that a lot of people are having a lot of snow. I see it on Facebook. But here we're having 70-degree Fahrenheit weather, so there's no snow here in Arizona at all, and no cardinals either. So once I put the cardinal down on the canvas board, then I filled in with a few more little pieces where I thought that something was lacking in the shape or the color. I call that patch pieces. Just finishing up. Just because I've cut it out, it doesn't mean it has to stay that shape. Definitely doesn't have to. So you can fill in, you can continue adding layers to your collage until you're happy. So then I needed to do the berries and the snow, and so I got out some scraps and I just started cutting round pieces of red paper out, folding the paper over, and then trimming it out. And then gluing those kind of in clusters around the branches, still looking at the cover of the magazine just to kind of get an idea of what it looks like. I'm doing this very quickly. I sped this up now, this section, to 8 times fast, trying to cut down on the amount of time this video is taking. So I had to cut some more for kind of the other side there, down at the bottom. But what's already starting to bother me is that there's a whole bunch of action down here at the lower right-hand side of the canvas, and there's nothing going on up at the upper left-hand side. Really bothers me. I would like to just cut that top off. I don't know if my chopper would do that or not, but I ended up fixing it in a different way. So then I cut some very thin strips of kind of yellowy orange paper to fill in some of the stems that I could see in the picture, and I had to cut them very skinny, very skinny, and then glue them down so that the berries weren't just floating. I have a bush in my backyard that has red berries like this on it, but it also has leaves. It never completely loses its leaves. So I don't know that it's the same type of a bush as this, although I have the same reddish orange berries all over it in the fall. Maybe it's a cousin of the other one, or maybe if we got a bunch of snow, the leaves would fall off. I don't know. Never does though. So then this is a product from DecoArt, and I opened it to do this project. I got it when DecoArt gave us a lot of things to try out and play with when we were in South Carolina at the art retreat. And it is a snow rider. It says it's a snow rider, but it's basically some dimensional paint. It hasn't completely dried yet when I'm doing this video, but I think it's going to end up being kind of rubbery, maybe. And it comes in a squeeze tube so that you could write with it if you wanted to. I'm not sure why you'd want to write with snow. I guess maybe, I don't know. But it made it easy to apply the snow onto my branches and berries like was in the picture. So I thought it worked out pretty well. It is very dimensional, whereas everything else is flat. So I'm not sure that how that will work out with putting this, framing it or something. You might need like some type of a deeper frame, type of a shadow box thing or something to frame it if you wanted to frame it. But it turned out pretty cool. I thought it was neat. And it looks like snow. Then I started to work on some of the shadows and highlights that I like to do on the bird. I was trying to give his eye and beak a little bit more definition using an illustration pen. And I decided to switch to shadows using my Pentel pocket brush. It was too dark. It was fine for around the face, but then everything else, it was too dark. So I ended up switching to a different water-soluble product, which is the Neocolor 2 water-soluble crayons from Caran d'Ache. And I use the indigo, which is the darkest blue that I have. Oh, I also have a white Posca pen and a white Jelly Roll pen, trying to give that highlight to the eye so it will stand out. Even in the picture, you can hardly see the eye. They must have little black beady eyes, and then really all you're seeing is the reflection of the eye. So I messed around with that a lot until I got it to the point where I was okay with it. So here's the indigo crayon, and I'm just scribbling it on, and then I'm activating it and smushing it out with a water tank brush. That's a type of brush that has water in the handle, so you don't have to keep dipping it. And I like to use these when I'm doing this type of shading. So I end up putting indigo under all the branches and at the bottoms of all the berries and around the bird, just because I think it adds a lot to a collage to have some type of shadow around it so that it doesn't appear as if you just stuck it on like a sticker. Even if I do stickers, I put shadows around them. I don't like that stuck on, no shadows, no highlights look at all. I don't appreciate it. So, of course, this stuff takes a long time to dry, and I'm not patient enough to wait for it to dry. So I just continue working around it and just keep trying to keep my wrist up so that I won't put my hand right into it. At some point I do put my hand in it, I think, but it wasn't too bad at that point. It just kind of squished it, so then I put some more on because it's puffy. I don't know if you can tell that in the video, but it's puffy. Back in the day, there used to be a type of fabric paint called puff paint or puffy paint, and it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. It feels rubbery. So then I'm taking a Posca pen, and I finally figure out at some point that this is the one that's empty, but I'm just kind of adding a highlight to where the feathers are shimmery in the picture. Shimmery, I don't know if shimmery is the right word, but you know what I mean. There's like a sheen to a bird. They're water resistant, and so they have that kind of oily something on their feathers that make it a little bit shiny, and that's where you get your highlight from, even though everything's mostly the same color. I do end up going back over this a little bit later with a different white Posca pen that actually has some paint in it. I'm like, why is this thing, have I gotten it in paint and ruined the tip? No, it was one that I should have thrown away, but it was sitting on the side and I thought it was my current one. I also have this new white jelly roll, which I'm trying out. I bought it for kind of doodling and stuff like that, but I haven't really tried it that much yet. Some of my friends are doodling on black paper and I want to try it, and I'm trying to come up with the right products to do that, so that's why I purchased it. So then I have this big blank space up at the top that's bothering me, so I went and got some postage stamps. I knew there was a postage stamp in my collection that had a cardinal on it. And I found some other ones that had similar colors, some reds and whites, and I started like a little, what I thought was going to be a 3 postage stamp collage in the corner. All these stamps are from Christmas time, so they're from different Christmas cards that people have sent me that I still have in a stack. I haven't stuck them on my bulletin board yet. Everything's a mess. Everything's a mess. It's just how it is. So then I ended up deciding that 3 wasn't enough, and I added the other 2 that I had from the same envelopes. This one has some nice red color on it, even though it has a queen. So I guess this cardinal must be a queen, even though it's a boy. There are boys that are queens. I was trying to come up with something else to fill up that space. It didn't like anything. It just, yeah. I should have made the bird bigger. Or else I should have taken that and chopped that top off, maybe. That would have been an easy solution. So then I added some splatters. The snow is on the bird's feathers in a few places on the picture. That was my inspiration for this. So I thought I would add some splatters. Still messing around with the eyeball. I want it to show, even though it really doesn't that much in the picture, but it's just bugging me. So I keep messing with it, adding more black back in, adding white back in, adding black back in for quite some time. So here's where I go in and kind of brighten up those highlights that I had made with the empty Posca pen with one that actually has some paint in it. I like that better. Then I end up adding the other 2 postage stamps like I mentioned before. So I hope you've enjoyed this first in the series of my animal portraits. And if you did, give me a comment or question below. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can share this on Pinterest. I've been going through and looking for my videos on Pinterest that other people have posted, and every time I see one I get really excited. I'm like, wow, somebody pinned my video. That's pretty awesome. I always forget to do it myself, and then I'm going through Pinterest and I see one of mine and I get very excited. So I must follow some people on Pinterest who follow me, because I do see mine every once in a while. So I added some more shading and stuff around those postage stamps to make them look like they're part of the composition. Some more splatters. And then I was pretty much done with this project. So that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.